The human exploration vessel Horizon moved slowly through the darkness of space. It had been traveling for 6 months through a region that every known species in the galaxy avoided. No one talked about why they avoided it. No one gave reasons. They simply stayed away, and that silence made Captain Laura more curious than afraid. She stood at the center of the bridge, watching the stars drift past on the main screen. Her crew of 47 people worked quietly at their stations. They trusted her, and she felt the weight of that trust every single day. The mission was simple on paper: investigate an anomalous signal that scientists on Earth had detected 3 years ago. The signal was old, not hundreds of years old, not thousands. The signal was billions of years old, and it was still broadcasting. Danny sat at the communications station, his fingers moving across the controls. He was young, only 26, but he had a gift for finding patterns in noise. He had been listening to the signal for weeks, trying to understand it. Most of the crew thought it was just some natural phenomenon, a pulsar or a magnetic field doing something strange. Danny was not so sure. The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and everyone on the bridge went silent. In front of them was something that no human had ever seen before. It was not a space station. It was not a ship. It was something else entirely. A massive structure made of crystal stretched across thousands of kilometers. It pulsed with soft blue light like a heartbeat, slow and steady and ancient. Dr. Caroline stood up from her station, her mouth open. She was the ship's, a woman in her 50s who had spent her entire life studying alien life forms. She had seen many strange things in her career, but this was different. This was beyond anything she had imagined. "Captain," Danny said, his voice shaking slightly. "The signal is coming from that structure, and there is something else. The pulses, they are not random. They are mathematical sequences. Prime numbers, then geometric progressions, then something more complex. Someone is trying to talk to us." Felt her heart beating faster. First contact. Every human dreamed of this moment, the moment when they would meet another intelligent species. Humanity had already met several alien races since leaving Earth. The galaxy was full of life. But this was different. This signal was older than most stars. Whatever created it had been watching the universe for a very, very long time. "Open a channel," said. "All frequencies, let them know we are here." Danny's fingers moved across the console. The ship sent out a greeting, a simple message of peace and curiosity. For a long moment, nothing happened. The crystal structure continued to pulse. The stars continued to shine. And then everything changed. A voice came through the ship's speakers. It did not come through the communication system. It simply appeared as if someone had placed it directly into the air. The voice spoke in perfect English, but there was something strange about it. The words were correct, but the rhythm was off, like someone remembering a language they had not spoken in a very long time. "You have come far, young ones. We have waited so very long." The bridge erupted in chaos. People shouted questions. Instruments beeped warnings, but raised her hand and slowly the noise died down. She took a deep breath and spoke. "My name is Laura. I am the captain of the human vessel Horizon. We come in peace, seeking knowledge and friendship. Who are you?" The voice was silent for a moment. When it spoke again, there was something like warmth in it, a feeling that should not have been possible from words alone. We are the oldest of the old. We have watched the stars being born and dying since before your world was formed. We have seen 10,000 civilizations rise and fall. We have recorded their stories so that the universe would not forget them. And now, after 3 billion years of waiting, you have come." Lieutenant, a young officer standing near the tactical station, looked at with wide eyes. 3 billion years, she whispered. "That is older than life on Earth." Nodded slowly. She understood what this meant. They were not just old. They were ancient beyond comprehension. They had existed when the galaxy was young. They had watched everything that had ever happened, and for some reason they had been waiting for humanity. "Why us?" asked. "Why were you waiting for us?" The voice did not answer immediately. The crystal structure pulsed brighter for a moment, and had the strange feeling that the being on the other end was thinking, considering how to explain something very complicated to someone very young. "That is a question with a long answer," the voice finally said. "And we have time. We have nothing but time. Come aboard, young ones. Let us show you what we have seen. Let us show you why you matter." Looked at her crew. She saw fear in some faces, excitement in others. Danny was already preparing a shuttle. Doctor was gathering her equipment. Everyone understood that this was the most important moment in human history. "We accept your invitation," said. "We will come aboard." The structure pulsed again, and a section of the crystal opened, revealing a passage of light. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Thought about Earth, about all the people who would never know what was happening here. She thought about her parents, who had encouraged her to reach for the stars. She thought about all the humans who had ever looked up at the night sky and wondered if they were alone. They were not alone. They had never been alone, and now they were about to learn why that mattered. "Danny," Caroline said, "you are with me. Everyone else, maintain position and keep recording. Whatever happens, the people of Earth need to know about this." As she walked toward the shuttle bay, felt a strange sense of peace. She did not know what they would find aboard the crystal structure. She did not know what the wanted, but she knew, deep in her heart, that humanity had reached a turning point. Nothing would ever be the same again. The shuttle launched into the darkness, carrying 4 humans toward a meeting that would change the course of galactic history. Behind them, the horizon waited, a small metal ship next to an ancient crystal mountain. And ahead of them, the oldest beings in the universe prepared to share their secrets with the youngest species they had ever met. The light of the passage grew brighter as they approached, and somewhere in the depths of the crystal structure, they watched and waited, remembering a time when they too had been young, when they too had looked at the stars with wonder and hope. They had waited 3 billion years for this moment. They were not going to waste it. The shuttle passed through the opening in the crystal structure, and Captain Laura felt like she was entering another world. The walls around them were not solid. They were made of light and crystal woven together in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Colors shifted and changed, some of them colors that had never seen before, colors that human eyes were not built to understand. Danny sat next to her, his recording equipment running constantly. He was documenting everything, knowing that scientists back on Earth would spend decades studying every second of this footage. Dr. Caroline pressed her face against the window, tears streaming down her cheeks. She had spent her whole life searching for alien life, and now she was inside the home of the oldest beings in existence. Lieutenant kept her hand near her sidearm, not because she expected trouble, but because old habits were hard to break. She was a soldier, trained to protect, but there was nothing to protect against here. There was only wonder. The shuttle landed in a chamber so vast that could not see the ceiling. The floor was made of the same crystal as everything else, but it was warm under their feet when they stepped out. It felt alive, like standing on the skin of some enormous sleeping creature. A figure approached them. It was not solid in the way humans were solid. It was made of shifting light, constantly changing shape, but somehow always recognizable as a single being. It moved with grace and purpose, and when it spoke, the voice was the same one they had heard on the ship. "I am called Rememberer of Echoes," the being said. "I have been chosen to guide you. Welcome to our home. Welcome to the archive of all things." Stepped forward, trying to keep her voice steady. "Thank you for receiving us. We have so many questions." "As do we," Rememberer of Echoes replied. "We have watched your species for only a short time, a few thousand of your years, but in that time you have surprised us. You have reminded us of things we had forgotten." The being turned and began to move deeper into the structure. The humans followed, their footsteps echoing in the vast space. As they walked, the walls around them began to change. Images appeared in the crystal, moving pictures of places and beings that did not recognize. "What is this place?" Doctor asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming her awe. This is our purpose, Rememberer of Echoes answered. When the universe was young, we asked ourselves a question. What is the point of existence if everything is eventually forgotten? Stars die, planets crumble, civilizations rise and fall, and no one remembers their names. We decided that we would remember. We would watch and record so that nothing would ever truly be lost. The images on the walls became clearer. Saw alien cities made of metal and glass. She saw beings that looked like insects, like fish, like nothing she could describe. She saw wars and peace treaties, births and deaths, triumphs and tragedies. Each image was a fragment of a story, a piece of a civilization that no longer existed. How many? Danny asked quietly. How many species have you recorded? Billions, Rememberer of Echoes said. Across 3 billion years, we have witnessed the rise of billions of intelligent species. Most of them are gone now. Some destroyed themselves, some were destroyed by others. Some simply faded away, their time finished. But we remember them all. Every song they sang, every story they told, every dream they dreamed. Shuddered, there was something deeply sad about this place. It was beautiful, yes, but it was also a graveyard, a monument to everything that had ever lived and died. Why did you never help them? She asked. If you were watching, why did you not stop them from destroying themselves? Rememberer of Echoes stopped walking. The light that made up its form flickered, and thought she saw something like pain in its movement. We tried once, it said. Long ago, when we were younger, we found a species on the edge of destruction. They were killing each other over resources, over beliefs, over things that did not matter. We intervened. We gave them technology. We taught them peace. We thought we were saving them. The being was silent for a moment. They used our technology to build weapons. They used our teachings to justify new wars. Within 1,000 years, they were extinct. We learned that we could not save anyone. We could only watch and remember. So that is what we did. For 3 billion years, we have watched and remembered, and we have not allowed ourselves to care. Doctor wiped her eyes. That is the saddest thing I have ever heard. It is our burden, Rememberer of Echoes agreed. Or it was, until you came. They entered a new chamber, smaller than the last but somehow more intimate. In the center stood a pedestal of crystal, and above it floated a sphere of pure light. Inside the sphere could see Earth. Not a picture of Earth, but Earth itself, as if she were looking through a window across thousands of light years. We have been watching your world for 3,000 years, Rememberer of Echoes said. We saw your first cities rise. We saw your wars and your plagues. We saw you reach for the stars, fail, and reach again. We recorded everything as we always do. But something was different about you. Something we had not seen in a very long time. What? Asked. Hope, the being replied. Every species we have watched eventually lost hope. They became cynical or tired or afraid. They stopped believing that things could be better, but you never did. No matter how many times you failed, no matter how much you suffered, you kept hopping. You kept trying. You kept believing that the future could be good. The sphere of light pulsed and saw images of human history. She saw people building hospitals and schools. She saw scientists working through the night to cure diseases. She saw ordinary people helping strangers, sharing food, offering comfort. She saw all the small acts of kindness that made up a civilization. We had forgotten what that felt like, Rememberer of Echoes said. We had forgotten that hope was possible. You reminded us. And that is why we invited you here. That is why, for the first time in 3 billion years, we are reaching out to another species. Danny laughed, a sound of pure joy that echoed through the chamber. You called us here because we are stubborn. We called you here because you are alive, Rememberer of Echoes corrected. Truly alive in a way that we stopped being long ago. And we want to learn from you. We want to remember what it means to hope. Felt tears on her cheeks, but she did not wipe them away. She understood now why they had been waiting. They were not looking for the strongest species or the species. They were looking for a species that had not given up. They were looking for proof that the universe was still worth caring about. "We would be honored to teach you," said, "and we would be honored to learn from you in return." Rememberer of Echoes moved closer and felt warmth surround her, like being wrapped in a blanket of light. "Then let us begin," the being said. "Let us begin the first true conversation between our peoples, and let us see what we can build together." The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within days, every intelligent species knew what had happened. The oldest and most mysterious beings in existence had made contact with the humans. Not just contact. They had invited them into their home. They had spoken to them as equals. For the first time in recorded history, the ancient observers were no longer just watching. The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting. The council was the closest thing the galaxy had to a unified government. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered in a massive station at the center of known space. They argued and debated and demanded answers. No one understood why they had chosen humanity. Humans were newcomers. They had only been traveling between stars for 200 years. They were nothing compared to species that had existed for millions of years. Ambassador Philip Grant arrived at the council station 3 weeks after first contact. He was a tall man in his 60s, with gray hair and calm eyes. He had spent his entire career preparing for moments like this, moments when the fate of humanity depended on saying the right words. But nothing had prepared him for the anger he faced when he entered the council chamber. Counselor of the Hegemony was the first to speak. The hegemony was one of the oldest powers in the galaxy, a collection of species that had ruled vast territories for millions of years. Was a large being covered in armored plates, with 4 arms and eyes that burned with cold fire. "This is an insult," declared. "They have existed since before our ancestors crawled from the oceans. They have never spoken to us, never shared their knowledge, never acknowledged our existence beyond brief observations. And now they choose to befriend these humans, these children who can barely travel faster than light." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Ambassador Grant stood quietly, letting the anger wash over him. He had expected this reaction. He would have felt the same way in their position. "Perhaps the humans have deceived them," suggested Counselor Myra of the Collective, a hive-mind species that communicated through chemical signals. "Perhaps they have tricked them somehow." "That is impossible," said another voice, and everyone turned to look. A column of light had appeared in the center of the chamber. It was Rememberer of Echoes, the who had guided the humans through the archive. The ancient being had come to speak for itself. "The cannot be deceived," Rememberer of Echoes said. "We have watched civilizations rise and fall for 3 billion years. We have seen every trick, every lie, every manipulation that intelligent beings are capable of. The humans have not deceived us. They have simply reminded us of something we had lost." Counselor leaned forward, his armored plates clicking together. "And what is that? What could these newcomers possibly have that we do not?" Rememberer of Echoes was silent for a moment. When it spoke again, its voice was softer, almost sad. "When was the last time you sang a song simply because it made you happy?" the being asked. "When was the last time you created art that served no purpose except beauty? When was the last time you loved someone so much that you would sacrifice everything for them, even though you knew you could not win?" The chamber was quiet. No one answered. "The humans do these things every day," Rememberer of Echoes continued. "They are small and fragile, and their lives are impossibly short. They know they will die. They know their civilizations will eventually fall. And yet they continue to hope. They continue to love. They continue to create meaning in a universe that offers none. This is what we recognized in them. This is what we had forgotten how to do." Ambassador Grant stepped forward. His heart was pounding, but his voice was steady. "We did not ask for this recognition," he said. "We did not seek it. We came to the seeking knowledge, and they offered us something far more valuable. They offered us understanding. They offered us a chance to learn from beings who have seen everything that has ever happened in this galaxy, and in return, they asked only that we share with them what makes us human. "And what makes you human?" Counselor Myra asked, genuine curiosity in its chemical voice. Grant thought about the question. He thought about his daughter back on Earth, about the way she laughed when she was happy. He thought about his wife, who had died 10 years ago, and about how he still talked to her picture every night before he went to sleep. He thought about all the humans who had ever lived, who had loved and lost and kept going anyway. "We feel things," he said finally. "We feel joy and sorrow, hope and despair, love and loss. We know that our time is limited, and that makes every moment precious. We build families and communities and civilizations, knowing that they will not last forever, and we love them anyway. That is what makes us human. We care about things even though caring hurts." Rememberer of echoes pulsed with light. "This is what we lost," the being said. 3 billion years ago we were like them. We felt things. We cared about things. We loved and grieved and hoped. But immortality has a cost. When you live forever, when you watch everyone you love die again and again, eventually you stop loving. You stop caring. You become observers instead of participants. You survive, but you stop truly living." The ancient being moved closer to the human ambassador, and Grant felt warmth surrounding him. "The humans have reminded us that living is worth the pain," Rememberer of Echoes said. "They have reminded us that caring about things, even things that will end, is what gives existence meaning. For that gift, we will always be grateful. And for that gift, we are choosing to end our isolation. We are choosing to be part of the galaxy again, starting with humanity." Counselor stood slowly. The anger had faded from his eyes, replaced by something else. Perhaps it was respect. Perhaps it was envy. Perhaps it was simply understanding. "You are saying that the humans are special because they are mortal?" he asked. "Because they die?" "I am saying they are special because they live," Rememberer of Echoes replied. "Truly live, with all the joy and pain that involves. They have not learned to protect themselves from feeling. They have not built walls around their hearts. They remain open to the universe, vulnerable and brave and beautiful. And that is something we had forgotten was possible." The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, Counselor bowed his massive head. "Perhaps we have all forgotten," he said quietly. "Perhaps we have all become too careful, too protected, too afraid to feel. Perhaps the humans can teach us something as well." Grant felt tears in his eyes, but he did not hide them. He was human. Humans cried when they felt things deeply. That was nothing to be ashamed of. "We would be honored to share what we know," he said. "We are a young species. We have made many mistakes. We have hurt each other and ourselves in ways we are not proud of. But we have also loved deeply and created beauty and found meaning in the darkness. If any of that can help others, then we offer it freely." Rememberer of Echoes pulsed with light once more, and Grant could have sworn the ancient being was smiling. "This is why we chose them," they said. "This is why, after 3 billion years, we finally found a species worthy of calling kin. Not because they are powerful, not because they are wise, but because they are brave enough to feel, to care, to hope. And that is the rarest and most precious thing in the entire universe." 6 months passed since first contact. The partnership between humans and grew stronger every day. Scientists from Earth traveled to the crystal structure to study the archives. Diplomats worked to build bridges between the ancient beings and the younger species of the galaxy. Everything was changing, faster than anyone had expected. Dr. Samuel Price was one of the scientists sent to study the records. He was a historian, a man who had spent his life studying the past, but nothing had prepared him for what he found in the archives. The records went back 3 billion years. They contained information about species that had existed before Earth was even formed. It would take thousands of lifetimes to study everything stored in those crystal halls. Samuel worked alone most of the time. He preferred it that way. The archives were quiet, peaceful, filled with soft blue light that never hurt his eyes. He would sit for hours, watching records play out on the crystal walls, learning about civilizations that no one else remembered. One day he found something that made him stop. It was a record from 2 billion years ago, a recording of themselves, but they were different. They were not the distant, passive observers that Samuel knew. They were alive with emotion. They laughed and argued and celebrated together. They created art and music and poetry. They loved each other with a passion that was almost painful to watch. You found the old memories. Samuel turned to see Rememberer of Echoes standing behind him. The ancient being's light was dimmer than usual, as if the memory had drained something from it. "What happened?" Samuel asked. "You were so different then. What changed?" Rememberer of Echoes moved closer to the record, watching its own people from 2 billion years ago. "Time happened," it said. "Immortality happened. When you live forever, you cannot stop change. The universe moves forward and everyone you know moves with it. Species rise and fall. Stars are born and die. Friends become memories, then legends, then names in ancient records that no one reads anymore." The being's light flickered with something like pain. "We tried to hold on at first. We made friends with other species. We loved them, taught them, celebrated with them. But they always died. Always. No matter how advanced they became, no matter how much we helped them, they always eventually ended. And we remained, carrying the grief of their loss." Samuel felt his heart breaking. He had never thought about what immortality would really mean. He had only imagined the good parts, the endless time to learn and grow and experience things. He had never considered the cost. "After the first billion years, we could not bear it anymore," Rememberer of Echoes continued. "The grief was too heavy. We had loved and lost so many times that our hearts were shattered beyond repair. So we made a choice. We stopped loving. We stopped caring. We became observers, recording everything but feeling nothing. It was the only way to survive." "But you did not really survive," Samuel said quietly. "You stopped living." The ancient being was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, we stopped living. We existed, but we did not live. For 2 billion years, we have been ghosts, watching the universe without being part of it. We told ourselves it was necessary. We told ourselves it was the only way. But the truth is, we were afraid. We were afraid of the pain that comes with caring. We were afraid of losing again." Samuel stood and walked toward the being. He was not afraid. He had spent enough time with it to understand that they were not gods or monsters. They were just people, ancient and wounded and tired. "And then we came," he said. "We humans with our short lives and our endless hope." "Yes," Rememberer of Echoes replied. "You came singing songs about homes you missed and families you loved. You came weeping at our archives, mourning species you had never met. You came reaching out to touch us, even though you knew we were different, even though you knew we might hurt you. You reminded us of what we used to be." Captain Laura arrived in the archive chamber at that moment. She had been searching for Samuel, wanting to discuss the next phase of the research project. But she stopped when she saw the ancient being's dimmed light, when she heard the pain in its voice. "What is happening?" she asked, moving quickly to stand beside Samuel. Rememberer of Echoes turned to face her. "I am remembering," it said. "Your scientist found our old memories from before we became what we are now. He asked what changed us. I was explaining the burden we carry." Looked at the record still playing on the wall, the images of celebrating and creating and loving. She understood immediately. She had lost people too. Her father had died when she was young. Her best friend had been killed in a shuttle accident 10 years ago. She knew what grief felt like. She could only imagine what it would feel like across 3 billion years. "You are asking us to feel again," Rememberer of Echoes said, its voice heavy with ancient sorrow. "You cannot know what you ask. To care is to eventually grieve. We have grieved enough to fill universes." Reached out and placed her hand against the shifting form. It was warm, alive, trembling. She felt the being's pain as if it were her own. "Maybe that is exactly why you need to try again," she said. "Grief means something mattered. It means you cared about something enough to miss it when it was gone. That is not a curse. That is a gift." The ancient being's light flickered, and could feel it struggling with emotions it had not allowed itself to feel in billions of years. "But it hurts," Rememberer of Echoes whispered. "It hurts so much." "I know," said gently. "It hurts us too. We lose people we love. We watch our parents grow old and die. We bury our friends and our children and our partners. Every human who has ever lived has felt that pain. But we keep loving anyway because the joy of loving is worth the pain of losing. Because a life without love is not really a life at all." Samuel stepped forward and placed his hand next to his, both of them touching the ancient being. "You do not have to be alone anymore," he said. "You do not have to carry this burden by yourself. Let us help you. Let us show you how to live again, how to feel again. We are only here for a short time, that is true. But while we are here, we can be your friends. We can share your joy and your sorrow. We can help you remember what it means to be alive." Rememberer of Echoes was silent for a long moment. The light that made up its form pulsed slowly, like a heart learning to beat again after being still for far too long. "You would do this for us?" it asked. "You would share our pain, knowing that you will only make it worse when you eventually die?" Smiled through her tears. "That is what friends do," she said. "They share everything, the good and the bad. They stand beside each other through joy and sorrow. They love each other even though they know it will end. That is what makes it meaningful. That is what makes it real." The ancient being's light grew brighter, stronger than it had been in millions of years. Rememberer of Echoes wrapped its warmth around both humans, holding them close. "Then teach us," it said. "Teach us how to feel again. Teach us how to live again. Teach us how to love even though it hurts. We are ready. After 3 billion years of hiding, we are finally ready to come home." Closed her eyes and leaned into the embrace. Around them, the archives hummed with energy, as if the memories of 1 billion lost civilizations were celebrating together. Something ancient was waking up. Something beautiful was being reborn. And humanity, the youngest and most fragile species in the galaxy, was leading the way. 1 year had passed since the horizon first entered space. In that time, the galaxy had changed more than it had in the previous million years. The ancient observers were no longer just watching. They were participating. They were sharing their knowledge, their history, their memories. And they were learning from humanity what it meant to truly live. The ceremony was held on a planet so old that it had seen the birth and death of its original star. They had built an artificial sun to replace it, a sphere of controlled fusion that had burned for 2 billion years. The planet itself was covered in crystal formations, entire continents of light and memory stretching from horizon to horizon. Captain Laura stood on a platform overlooking a vast amphitheater. Billions had gathered, more than had assembled in millions of years. Their lights filled the space like stars brought down to Earth, pulsing in patterns that created a symphony of color and warmth. Beside stood the humans who had been part of this journey from the beginning. Ambassador Philip Grant, his gray hair now than ever, smiled with tears in his eyes. Dr. Caroline clutched her recording equipment, determined to document every moment. Dr. Samuel Price stood quietly, thinking about all the history he had learned in the archives. Lieutenant kept her back straight and her eyes forward, proud to represent humanity at this moment. And Danny, the young communications officer who had first decoded the signal, could barely contain his excitement. There were others too. In the year since first contact, hundreds of humans had traveled to space. Scientists, artists, teachers, ordinary people who simply wanted to meet the ancient beings and share their stories. Each of them had changed in small ways. Each of them had helped the oldest species in the galaxy remember what it meant to be alive. A column of light descended from the sky and took form in the center of the amphitheater. This was not Rememberer of Echoes. This was someone far older, far more powerful. The light coalesced into a being that radiated ancient wisdom and gentle strength. "I am first light of morning," the being announced, its voice echoing across the gathered billions. "I am the eldest of the. I was born when the universe was young, when the first stars were still forming. I have watched everything that has ever happened in this galaxy, and today I speak for all my people." The amphitheater fell silent. Every being, and human alike, waited to hear what the eldest would say. "We have watched the rise of 10,000 empires," first light of morning began. "We have recorded the songs of 1,000,000 species. We have preserved the memories of those who came before so that existence itself would not forget. But in all that time, we lost something precious. We lost ourselves." The ancient being turned slowly, looking at the humans standing on the platform, at the stars burning overhead. 3 billion years ago, we were like the beings we watched. We loved and grieved and hoped. We created beauty and meaning. We were alive in ways that made existence worthwhile, but the weight of immortality crushed us. We watched everyone we loved turn to dust. We saw civilizations we had nurtured destroy themselves. Eventually, we could not bear the pain anymore. We chose to stop feeling. We chose to become observers instead of participants. We survived, but we stopped truly living. First light of morning moved toward the platform where the humans stood, felt the warmth of the ancient being's attention focused on her, and she stood taller, meeting that attention with human pride and human courage. "And then these beings found us," the eldest continued. "These small, fragile creatures from a young world on the edge of the galaxy. They live such brief lives. Their entire civilization is younger than many of our memories. They are weak compared to us. They know almost nothing compared to us, and yet they have something we lost long ago." The ancient being's light pulsed with emotion that they had not allowed themselves to feel in billions of years. "They came to us not with weapons or demands. They came with curiosity and warmth. They sang songs in our corridors, songs about homes they missed and people they loved. They wept at our archives, mourning species they had never met, grieving for beings who had been dust for millions of years. They reached out to touch us when we had forgotten what touch meant. They offered us friendship when we had forgotten what friendship was." First light of morning stopped directly in front of Captain. The ancient being was enormous, a tower of light that could have destroyed solar systems with a thought. And yet, when it spoke, its voice was gentle, almost tender. "You reminded us that the universe is not merely to be observed, but to be lived," the eldest said. "You reminded us that caring about things, even things that will end, is what gives existence meaning. You reminded us that love is worth the pain of loss. You reminded us of who we used to be, who we want to be again." The ancient being turned back to face the gathered billions. "From this day forward, humanity is not our subject, not our student, not our project. They are our kin, our family, the siblings we thought we would never find, and together we will face whatever comes next." The amphitheater erupted in light. Billions of pulsed in unison, a rhythm that somehow felt like a heartbeat, like the breath of the universe itself. The sound was overwhelming, a symphony of joy and hope and renewal that echoed across the planet and out into space. Captain stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "We are honored," she said, her words carrying across the vast space. "We are humbled. We are grateful beyond words. And we promise you this, all of you, every who has watched and waited and remembered. We promise you that you will never have to be alone again." She paused, looking at her fellow humans, at the ancient beings gathered around them, at the artificial sun burning overhead. "We cannot promise you that we will live forever. We cannot promise you that we will never disappoint you or hurt you or make mistakes. We are human, we are imperfect, we will fail sometimes, but we can promise you this: we will always try, we will always hope. We will always love, even when loving is hard, even when it hurts, even when we know it will end in loss, because that is who we are. That is what makes us human. And now, that is what makes us your kin." First light of morning reached out with tendrils of pure light and wrapped them around all the humans on the platform. It was not a gesture of power. It was an embrace, the first true embrace the eldest had given to anyone in billions of years. "Welcome to our family," the ancient being whispered. "Welcome to our hearts. Welcome home." Across the galaxy, the news spread instantly. Every species heard what had happened. The oldest beings in existence had opened their hearts again. They had found family in the youngest and most fragile species anyone had ever met. They had found hope in beings who measured their lives in decades rather than eons. And in that moment, everything changed. The galaxy was no longer just a collection of species competing for resources and power. It was a community, bound together by the example of humans, and by the knowledge that connection was possible, that love could overcome even 3 billion years of isolation. Captain stood on surrounded by ancient light and human warmth, and she smiled. She thought about Earth, about all the people who would never see this moment but who had made it possible. She thought about every human who had ever loved someone, who had ever hoped for something better, who had ever refused to give up even when giving up would have been easier. They had done this, not with weapons or technology or power. They had done this simply by being human, by feeling things deeply and caring about things strongly and hoping for things impossibly. They had reminded the oldest beings in the universe that existence was worth caring about. And that realized was the greatest victory humanity had ever achieved. Not conquest, not survival, connection, love, family. The stars burned overhead, ancient and eternal, but they no longer seemed cold and distant. They seemed like home. They seemed like hope. They seemed like the beginning of something wonderful. The oldest species in the galaxy had found their kin, and together humans and would face the future, not as observers but as family, not as strangers but as friends, not alone but together. Always together. Forever.